great Cthulhu lurks under the waves. Berber. Berber. Berber, Berber. This is what having too much time on your hands looks like. I don't need no Candy Crush. Has it really been 3 months since my last upload? Yeah, I kinda dropped the ball on that one. See, I do video editing for another channel. Well, I do video editing for all my channels, but the other one requires quite a great deal more than this one does. So I've been busting my ass trying to get that one off the ground as well. I'm trying to rearrange the blocks to give myself a little bit more free time, and hopefully that will lead to me being a bit more active. With that being said, historically, my greatest nemesis is my own ambition, so we'll see how that goes. Elitism. Ooh, the E word! Widely considered a taboo subject. Why is that? I'm serious, why? I mean, if it were a clear-cut issue of right and wrong, presumably we wouldn't have this much of an issue, trying to talk about it. For instance, if we were to have a discussion about eating baby kittens, 99% of us would agree that it's wrong. And there might be one guy that says they go good with barbecue sauce, but that's Ted. We don't really talk to Ted. The point is, we would have very little trouble discussing the issue itself. I think that's because elitism, as adamant as some members of our subculture may feel about it, really isn't a clear-cut issue of right or wrong, is it? I think it's more of a philosophical issue, and I think it's a very many-faceted issue. I mean, seriously, if there are any more shades of gray here, I'd have to start talking about BDSM. Unfortunately, the Fetish Goth video is next week. The discussion of elitism almost inevitably breaks down two ways. There are those who say elitism is bad, and they're right. And there are those who say they're allowed to have an opinion, and they are also right. Now, I would hazard a guess, dear viewer, if you've been a member of the subculture for any length of time, or even been watching video vlogs such as these for any length of time, you've probably formulated your own opinion on the issue already. In fact, I fully expect about 90% of the people to be watching this video to not agree with me, or at least not agree entirely. And that's fine. This is simply my opinion. You're entitled to your own, and it is not the intent of this video to try and change it. But if I can at least give you something to consider, I haven't wasted my breath. If I am able to convince you of anything, I hope it is only that I did not come to these conclusions lightly. I spent weeks trying to see it from every different possible perspective, trying to worm my consciousness into every little nook and cranny I could possibly get it to fit in. And I'm sure I still missed some, but good God, if I'm going to stick my face in Pandora's box and gargle a Hallelujah chorus, I'm going to have as many ducks in a row as possible. So let's start at the logical beginning. How do I feel about elitism? Well, me personally, this guy, Chaz LaBelle, I couldn't give a shit how goth somebody is. One of my best friends identified as goth for the first 2 years I knew him. This guy couldn't tell the difference between Angels of Liberty and Angels in the Outfield. I'd still take a bullet for his ass. My ex had more baby bat in her than Dracula's placenta. I was with her for a year. But before we all join hands and start singing Kumbaya in the drum circle, I do think that we as a subculture need to be a bit more discerning with just whom we are okay with using the label of goth. Now, some of you might say that that's an elitist standpoint, and I could see how you'd feel that way. However, I would argue that it's a linguistic standpoint. To be fair, I might take this a little bit more seriously than most people. I write. That's my thing. I can't draw. I'm musically retarded. I write. I'm currently shopping around a novel manuscript to a couple of agents, and I've got a couple freelance projects kicking around in a ye old laptop. Writing is my thing. So, needless to say, I have a deep reverence for the power of words. But I think that it's a universal concept. If you've ever been moved by perhaps a beautiful song, or a poem, or a memorable quote, you understand that words have power. Now, it is a fact that has been reiterated many, many, many times over. There is a metric fuck-ton of What is Goth videos on YouTube. Now, including mine. Though the reasons for posting them may differ, I'm going to go out on a limb here and infer that the prevalence of them means that the majority of us understand the importance of trying to define Goth. The issue, however, is that definitions are not meant to be inclusive. Quite the opposite, in fact. The reason that we define what a door is so that we can differentiate it from a window. Therefore, to define Goth, in order to have that which is Goth, you must also have that which is not Goth. Otherwise, to quantify something as Goth becomes meaningless. This is intrinsic in language and the philosophy behind it. You cannot have up without down. You cannot have the concept of left without also having the concept of right. Now, you don't have to use those exact words. You could call this your right. You could call this your not left. You could call this your fucking quizzle quackle for all the difference that it makes. But without some kind of differentiation between the two, if both of these can be considered my left side, then what the fuck does turn left mean? Oh, well, it means don't go straight. Okay, again, we are inferring the meaning of something by comparing it to that which it is not. And Goth is no different. If there is no not Goth, then anything at all could be Goth, and the descriptor loses all meaning. So if you attempt to define Goth, but then say, well, this could be Goth, or this could be Goth, or this could be Goth if you squint real hard while dancing thrice widdershins around a lake of moonwater at midnight, it's like building a fence around your house, then cutting a big-ass hole in the fence and laying out a welcome mat in front of it. Why the hell did you bother building the fence in the first place? Ironically, if we go the complete opposite direction and attempt to not define Goth at all, we end up at the same problem. If Goth doesn't refer to anything in particular, then it could refer to anything. And again, the efficacy of the word is nil. So either way, we arrive at one of two inevitables. Either Goth is nothing, and I certainly hope I don't have to make a case against that, or somewhere out there, there's a boundary. Now, that's not to say that the boundary is inflexible and rigid, or that the area within the boundary doesn't encompass a vast swath, or even that those within the boundary must fit neatly within it. It simply means that somewhere out there, in the gray, murky ether, the boundary exists. Now, typically, when a sentiment like that is shared, some people go way to the other extreme and say, well, then, by your definition, the only true Goth is the 1980s trad Goth. No. Why? I adore trad Goth. I really do. But expecting all Goths to be trad Goth is like going to a normal people dance club and expecting a scene out of Night at the Roxbury. The best way I can illustrate this point is a while ago. I was privileged enough to be taking part in a Facebook conversation with some esteemed members of the YouTube Goth community. And I suppose I was supporting a, for lack of a better term, somewhat antagonistic point of view, by which I mean if the non-antagonistic point of view is hugs and love and cuddles and acceptance, then I was riding the butthole train to Sphincterville. And a prominent member of the community said, well, if you feel that way, why not exclude the hippie goths or the cyber goths? Which is really a great point, and I know it echoes the sentiments of a lot of other goths I've interacted with. And I'll be honest, at the time, she pretty much shut my ass right down, because I didn't have a response for it. But after really considering her words and letting them sink in, I believe now I do. First of all, hippie goths. I'm really not even sure why they were brought into the equation. I mean, goths generally tend to be peaceful people. Most of us love nature. It would seem that if someone were to really take those values to heart, hippie goth is kind of a natural extension. But cyber goth I find interesting, because I know there's a bit of contention among the community as to whether or not they constitute real goths. In my opinion, yes, they do. When I see a cyber goth, I picture them traversing a dusty, arid landscape, stepping over these desiccated corpses that choked on the noxious fumes, still writhing about in the dusky orange sky above them. You see, to me, it's the same thing, just done slightly differently. The same sensibilities that we might evoke with bats or skulls or coffins, they evoke with post-apocalyptic imagery and cybernetic dehumanism. But see, that's an important distinction. I have no problems with variance. In fact, variance is healthy. Even a cursory look at human history, or just history in general, will tell you that that which does not evolve stagnates, and that which stagnates dies. But there's a major difference between a variation on something and something completely different. And of course, that logic kind of works both ways. If we're willing to consider just anyone goth, then hey, why not the emos? I mean, everybody thinks we're the same thing anyway, right? Nobody's going to notice. They could be emo goth. Or hey, what about the scene kids? Those guys wear lots of black and shop at Hot Topic. They could be scene kid goth. Or hey, why stop there? How about that one guy that sometimes wears a black t-shirt? He could be sometimes wears a black t-shirt goth. After all, we wouldn't want to be elitist. If we do not assert some kind of limitation, then there is no limitation. And then the word goth loses all meaning. Now, I'm not asserting that we should gather our torches and our pitchforks and start lynching mall goths. No. All I'm asking is that we have the respect for ourselves and for this subculture that we all love so much to say, no, dude, you're really not goth, and here's a cogent, logical reason why. That's not to say that the word couldn't apply to you in the future, it just does not apply to you as you are now. But wait, Chaz, at the beginning of this video, didn't you say that elitism was bad? Why, yes I did, keen observer. You get a gold star. Elitism is bad, because if the subculture is to endure, new goths need to come from somewhere. We need our baby bats. And it is our responsibility to ensure that they enter the subculture with an understanding of what it truly means to be a member of the subculture. By the way, I know some people see the term baby bat as offensive. I don't. To me, I mean, we've all had our baby bat stages. We all freely admit it. We all freely talk about it. To me, baby bat just kind of means larval goth, if you will. So if we go around acting like superior douchebags to our baby bats, all we really do is end up poisoning our subculture in the long run. But then, Chaz, what's the difference? Exactly. Now we are arriving at the question that needs to be asked. What precisely is the difference between upholding some kind of limitations for usage of the G word and just being an elitist prick? I propose to you that elitism is introduced when the distinction between that which is goth and that which is not goth becomes arbitrary. What do I mean? Let's play a game. It's called Find the Elitist Statement. I'm sure some of you would argue that they're all elitist statements, but for the sake of argument, let's pretend there's a right answer here. Ready? Go! You are not goth just because you wear black clothing. You are not goth if all you want is to wear strange makeup to freak people out. You are not goth because you can't name 5 Bauhaus songs. Getting the hang of it? Let's play again. You are not goth if you're only trying to be different just for the sake of being different. You are not goth because you do not possess any of the traits, interests, appreciations, etc., indicative of members of the subculture. You are not goth because your shoes are blue. When the determining factor about whether or not someone is goth becomes less about the person and more about incidentals, the distinction becomes arbitrary, and thus cometh elitism. Another factor that has contributed to the stigmata of the big bad elitist is the notion of a more experienced goth being a dick to an inexperienced baby bat when they could just as easily have educated them. Unfortunately, this notion is entirely dependent upon the misconception that everyone who takes the goth label has an honest interest in being part of the subculture. Speaking from personal experience, this is a vicious fallacy. For every baby bat that has a genuine interest in goth, there are just as many people who use the word in whichever way they please, for whatever they think it means, in whatever way they deem appropriate, and no matter how politely you try to offer them knowledge, are more than happy to give a hearty "go fuck yourself" in return. Are we to just simply be okay with this? I know that there are many goths out there who are dropping their label, so to speak. They still have the same interests and personalities, but they no longer identify with the word goth, because there are so many preconceived notions surrounding it, or because it has been so horribly misaligned, and of course it's their decision, and if that's what works for them and makes them happy, more power to them. But the concept itself is something that honestly quite saddens me. And it's because I am so proud of who I am. Because I wear my labels like badges of honor. Because I found a spiritual home in this subculture, and I take great pride in my ability to use that word to declare it. I am a goth. I love the music and the aesthetic and the beauty. I love bats and vampires and skulls. I love the serenity of a cemetery, the solace of the darkness. I love the sound the wind makes as it whispers through the trees, cast in the silver glow of the full moon. And I love that with one single word, one tiny little monosyllabic utterance, I can share these loves with countless people all around the world who also share them. And that with that one word, we have a banner to unite beneath, a common ground, no matter how disparate individuals we may be. Goth is a beautiful word, because so few other words in our language, English, or any other, can evoke so many passions at once without succumbing to the abyss of vagaries. To me, dropping my label, allowing it to be misused as the misuser sees fit, in my mind is something akin to King Lot giving his daughters over to the people of Gomorrah. Here, take it. Do what you want with it. I'm just going to look this way for a while. And you might say, goth is just a word, Chaz. We don't need the word. And that may be true, but Jesus Christ, isn't this supposed to be something we're proud of? Look, I don't know how many goth vlogs there are on YouTube. Okay, I couldn't begin to guess. All I know is I have never seen this many people vlogging about their pervasive rectal itch or their explosive hemorrhoids. The YouTube goth community is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. You don't just happen to have this many people willing to attach their face and their name to something and saying, yes, this is who and what I am, without at least taking some small measure of pride in it. Whether you choose to use the word or not, we are all united by the simple fact that the goth subculture is something we all love. I mean, seriously, why are we so afraid to tell somebody they're not goth? When did "you are not goth" become an insult? It's not as if that phrase implies they are somehow less of a person, or it's not as if we automatically shun all non-goths. I don't have any goth friends. I have pasty nerd friends, and them's as cool peoples. What, you want to say that I'm not goth? Go ahead. I'm serious. That's not an insult. That's not an attack on me. You are allowed to have an opinion. You are allowed to make observations. That's not to say that I wouldn't strongly disagree with you, but holy hell, I'm not going to start reenacting the Passion of the Christ over it. Just because Goths love the 80s doesn't make it 1984. Another thing that always crawls straight up my ass is when a Goth feels the need to preface an opinion with something to the effect of, well, not that I think I'm the gothiest thing ever, which is presumably a preempted defense against, oh, so you think you're the gothiest thing ever? Here's a question nobody ever seems to ask. Why would I have to be? Am I living in a fog-shrouded castle in Transylvania, sleeping in a coffin? No, of course fucking not. Nobody is. I guarantee you, you can duct tape as many leaves to your forehead as you want, bury your feet, and no matter how much you call yourself a tree, nobody is going to be standing around going, you know, Steve, I'm not a biologist, but I don't believe that individual's capable of photosynthesis. No, fuck no. Bob the construction worker is going to tell you to get the fuck off his front lawn. What should matter is that the opinion is based in logic, and it has sound reasoning behind it. Not that the purveyor of the opinion happens to hold the world Goth high score, which the same people will tell you doesn't exist. There must be a boundary somewhere. And again, I'm not insisting that it has to be a rigid boundary. I'm not saying that we should put forth a mandate that everyone must have exactly 7 skulls, 3 spiders, and 2 bats in their wardrobe at all times to be considered Goth, because that gives way to arbitrary elitism. And honestly, a rigid boundary would do us more harm than good, because it would cost us a lot of the originality and diversity and individuality that makes this subculture as amazing as it is. But there should still be a division somewhere. Or else we end up with sometimes wears a black t-shirt Goth. At what point does it become nonsense? At what point are we just sitting back and allowing someone to run roughshod over a word that very likely means far more to us than it does to them? Elitism. If it means the same thing as dickhead, just spare yourself their diatribes and just call them a dickhead. Anything less, and they're just another doofus with an opinion. And as a very wise man once said, opinions are like assholes, everybody's got one. Including me. I'm Chaz the Geek Goth. Stay batty. Now, if you'll excuse me, the Master of Relief requires an offering. More bubbles for Lord Cthulhu. Next time on Chaz the Geek Goth, my pervasive rectal itch.